Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, Israelis undaunted, recognizing Memorial Day and Independence Day, despite the threat of wildfires. Plus, a modern miracle, a nation is born in a day. The modern Jewish state standing strong for 77 years through wars and attacks from hostile neighbors. And exciting evidence from 1,500 years ago showing a Jewish presence in ancient Israel. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. From Memorial Day ceremonies to suspicious wildfires on the eve of Independence Day, Israelis observe this week's national holidays despite the challenges. Here's the report from our news desk on the ceremonies, celebrations, wildfires, and more. A siren wailed throughout Israel Wednesday evening to mark the beginning of Memorial Day, remembering the soldiers who gave their lives in Israel's wars and the victims of terrorist attacks. The opening ceremony took place at Jerusalem's Western Wall. Relatives and friends are coming to military cemeteries around the country to remember the fallen and comfort one another. A special collection of black and white photos unveiled this month show that from its founding in 1948, almost the entire population has been expected to take up arms to defend the country. Enemies have frequently launched wars to eliminate the Jewish state, and nearly 30,000 soldiers and others have died in battle or at the hands of terrorists. Their names are projected on the walls of Jerusalem's Old City, and their names are also read in this Hall of Remembrance. As seen by the brutal Hamas attack on October 7, 2023, terrorists consider even Israel's children and babies legitimate targets. As the war continues, IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir said Israel will prevail.
Our
enemies have misjudged our response. So too has Hamas misjudged our determination to bring back the hostages and to defeat it. These two missions are intertwined. We will continue and intensify our efforts until both are achieved.
Israel's President Isaac Herzl warned that internal strife is also a threat, and Israelis must stand together.
This year, perhaps more than ever, the siren sound is also a true alarm, commanding us, unite and come together. Do not tear apart from within. Do not destroy our home.
Immediately after Memorial Day, mourning turns into joy during Israel's 77th Independence Day. That same collection of black and white photos shows Israelis across the years celebrating their nation's birth 77 years ago.
Careless hikers may have started some of the worst blazes the Jewish nation has had in a decade, but it appears Palestinians may have deliberately set other fires. Authorities have arrested 3 arson suspects so far. Arab social media filled with praise for the fires, and some posts called for setting more blazes. CBN's Raj Nair interviewed Israeli tour guide Ron Lahad on why arsonists would do this, especially on the Israeli holidays of Memorial Day and Independence Day, when Israelis were memorializing fallen soldiers and terror victims.
For some people, anything that hurts Israel, anything that hurts the day, anything that hurts the country, the symbolism, that's their goal.
Meanwhile, Israeli leaders are watching closely as a 4th round of talks this weekend to halt Iran's nuclear weapons development was postponed. And then President Donald Trump upped the pressure on Iran through more sanctions.
Put sanctions on last night. Any oil that anybody takes from Iran is not allowed to do business in the United States of America.
At the same time, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned Iran will pay a heavy price for supporting Houthi rebels who've been attacking international shipping. On X, he wrote, "We see your lethal support to the Houthis. We know exactly what you are doing. You know very well what the U.S. military is capable of, and you were warned. You will pay the consequence at a time and place of our choosing." Early Friday, Israel intercepted a Houthi missile. Shrapnel fell in this kindergarten in northern Israel. And Israel is still protecting the Druze people in Syria. Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz issued a joint statement confirming Israel struck near the presidential palace in Damascus, saying, This is a clear message to the Syrian regime. We will not allow the deployment of forces south of Damascus or any threat to the Druze community. Meanwhile, here in Israel, despite the previous day's wildfires, Israelis pressed forward and took to the parks on Thursday to celebrate the country's 77th Independence Day. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
It's been 77 years since a declaration signed in Tel Aviv changed the world forever. Against overwhelming odds, the fledgling state of Israel not only survived, but has grown beyond expectation. Here's a look at that moment and how it put a tiny nation on the path to becoming a world power.
הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל היא מדינת ישראל.
Here in Independence Hall on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the birth of the modern state of Israel. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people had a nation.
He chose the words, "We hereby declare the establishment," it says here, "of a Jewish state in the land of Israel to be known as the state of Israel." This was the birth of a Jewish state. As for all Jews, Ben-Gurion was standing here as the voice of 11 million Jews around the world who had no voice, who had no address, and nowhere to go to.
Isaac Dror's mission here is to ensure the story of Israel's beginning remains alive and continues to spread.
It was promised to us by God. We are the only people in the history of the world that live on the same land, speak in the same language, and believe in the same God more than 3,000 years.
From a biblical perspective, many see Israel fulfilling the prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, where the dry bones of the Jewish people come to life after 2,000 years of exile. Organizations like the Jewish Agency help lay the groundwork for that 2,000 years in the making Jewish state.
The Jewish Agency was the lead organization in establishing and giving birth to the modern state of Israel. The whole purpose of establishing the Jewish Agency was to, on the one hand, unite the global Jewish people and to bring the global Jewish people in front of the British mandate to be the organization that would lead and establish a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel.
To fully comprehend the miracle of the country's birth, consider that it happened in the shadow of the Holocaust, or Shoah in Hebrew, when the world learned how Nazi Germany murdered 6 million Jews.
When you understand that only 3 years after the end of the Shoah, the lowest point the Jewish people reached in its exile, we started our redemption process and we regained our independence after 2,000 years of terrible events. Well, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what a miracle is.
Even so, Dayan dispels one myth about the connection between Israel's beginning and the Holocaust.
Israel was not established because of the Holocaust. Israel was established in spite of the Holocaust. Israel would have been a much robust, greater, secure, successful country if there were additional 6 million Jews and their descendants in the world. But Israel is the guarantee that there will be no other Shoah for the Jewish people.
Now, after 77 years, Israel maintains its safety and security with one of the most powerful militaries in the world.
Then it was small units of very patriotic people, some of them Holocaust survivors who just came off the boat from Europe, put on IDF uniforms and joined battle and defended Israel in 1948 against 6 Arab armies. Today, we are a highly organized, developed and well-funded military, perhaps the strongest in the region, that enjoys a significant technological advantage over all of our enemies.
Israel is also an economic miracle. This tiny country with less than 10 million people has the highest concentration of new businesses per capita in the world, earning it the nickname of Startup Nation. John Medved, founder of Our Crowd, a venture capital investment company, showcases these accomplishments at his annual Investor Summit.
This is what Israel is supposed to be doing, right? If Israel wasn't the startup nation, so what are we going to be? Okay, I'm sorry, this is our destiny. Our destiny is to create. Our destiny is to, fix the world. And we're just a little people. We make a lot of noise. But I think that most Israelis, whether they wear a yarmulke or they don't wear a yarmulke, view this as a spiritual undertaking, that we're doing this not just to make money, but to do good.
Yet throughout its history, Israel has faced nearly insurmountable odds. Just hours after Ben-Gurion declared the state, 6 Arab nations tried to drive it into the sea. While it survived, Israel would be challenged again in the 1967 Six-Day War, the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and in 2023 on October 7th. After thousands of years in exile and 77 as a country, Israel stands despite enemies within and outside its borders.
It's a modern miracle. The rebirth of the Jewish state against all odds, a people that were left for dead, that had been dispersed to the four corners of the earth, and you saw the ancient prophecies fulfilled, where you had the ingathering of the Jewish exiles, the restoration of Jewish sovereignty in modern times, against all odds.
Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. and now Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer tells CBN News this miracle can be seen unfolding throughout the nation.
And you're seeing that happen wherever you go in Israel, whether it's in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and you saw all the ancient history, and then you see the startup nation. You go north, south, east, and west. Israel is a modern miracle. It is the greatest miracle of the 20th century, and maybe the greatest miracle of the last 2,000 years.
Coming up, the State of Israel reborn in a Tel Aviv art gallery. We take you to the room where it happened and meet the woman who helped make history. A nation was born in a day in 1948 when a declaration signed in a Tel Aviv art gallery announced the rebirth of the Jewish state. CBN's Scott Ross, who's no longer with us, looked back at that moment with someone who was there. Here's his report from a few years ago.
We are in a historic setting here. Where are we and what happened?
This is the room where the Jewish state of Israel was born 70 years ago. In this tiny room with these same furnitures, a ceremony that lasted 32 minutes and shook the world.
As British rulers left Israel that day, 5 Arab armies invaded.
So it's like when you mix the happiest day for the Jewish people, one of the greatest moments for our nation in modern times, with one of the most dangerous and sad days when Israel was that close to a complete annihilation.
Why this building? Why here? Why Tel Aviv?
This building was simply the safest auditorium in the city of Tel Aviv.
Who were the people that were here?
Most of them people from around Tel Aviv, because they could not invite people from Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was disconnected. Only 350 of them were lucky enough to be squeezed in the room with no air conditions.
And among the crowd of witnesses was Yael Sharet.
Her father was on the stage here, Moshe Sharet. He was the right hand of Ben-Gurion and the kind of the foreign minister of the provisional government of Israel.
I met Yael Sharet Medini at her home near Tel Aviv.
Here's my aunt, and this is my forehead. Hopefully there's something behind it, as I say. And we shared a chair there, next to the wall.
She told me how just the day before, her father dictated and Yael wrote a draft of the Declaration of Independence.
This is my father's version of the Declaration. The one that he dictated to me, this is my handwriting. This is a photocopy of the original. Yeah. The original is in the archive.
Yael simply calls herself a handmaiden of history. Do you remember the event itself when Ben-Gurion stood up and read?
It's epic. It's really epic. Mm-hmm. It's poetry, actually. The only time I was really moved, I must say, was when the Rabbi Levine made the old age Jewish blessing.
That ancient Jewish prayer, recited on momentous occasions, thanks God who has given us life, sustained us, and allowed us to reach this day.
I'm not religious, but this blessing has an echo of generations.
Did you sing?
Atikva, yes. And then everybody stood up, and it was the anthem, the national anthem.
The very next day, which was the Sabbath, President Harry Truman became the first world leader to recognize Israel.
The Pentagon and the State Department truly believed that Ben-Gurion, the leader of Israel, is leading the world into a new catastrophe. One person, however, thought differently. His name was Harry Truman. He understood something that most of his top advisors and ministers failed to see. This is truly a prophecy being realized.
70 years later, it's clear that Truman was right.
We are faster, better, prettier than ever today. The economy of Israel is doing wonderfully well. They call a startup nation. And now we see Israel standing, and thanks God, together with the Americans, in the spirit of those countries who are leading. Suddenly people understand why we are here.
Scott Ross for CBN in Tel Aviv.
When we come back, the European visionary who saw that the Jewish people would never be safe until they had their own country. There's one man who looms over the story of modern Israel, and if it weren't for him, there might not even be a Jewish state. Paul Strand talked to a leading commentator who assembled 3 volumes about this monumental figure's most important writings.
Here at the highest point of Mount Herzl, the grave of modern Israel's most famous founder overlooks Jerusalem and the nation he fought so hard for the Jews to once again possess. Theodor Herzl, a refined Jewish gentleman living in Europe, saw a growing hatred of Jews in the late 1800s and feared the prejudice would never end. That's when he realized God's chosen people needed a safer place to live and sought to take them back to their sacred homeland.
Imagine where the Jewish people were 125 years ago. Broken, lost, wandering, homeless. And this guy with piercing black eyes and a beautiful black beard and a real sense of dignity says, we are a people, we have ties to a particular homeland, and the right to establish a state on that homeland. Zionism. We're going to return to Zion.
In an effort to keep Israel's history alive for new generations, professor and Jerusalem Post commentator Gil Troy has edited the 3-volume Zionist writings of Theodor Herzl.
He saw that at a time when the French were becoming more French and the Italians were becoming more Italian, and there was this amazing thing called America coming together, that it was a moment of nationalism. And in order for the Jews to be accepted, truly respected, they needed their own home. Unfortunately, there was this ugly disease called anti-Semitism, which too many Europeans couldn't get over. It traumatized Herzl. And he said, wait a minute, I'm not going to give in to despair, although he has his dark moments. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to find a way home.
Herzl, a journalist and playwright, wrote of a strong, confident new breed of people establishing this Jewish homeland.
The idea must wing its ways into the most remote, miserable holes where our people dwell. They will awaken from their gloomy torpor. Then, activated, a generation of marvelous Jews will spring into existence.
He lobbied world leaders and assembled Jews from all over to Basel, Switzerland for the first World Zionist Congress. That set off a powerful Zionist movement and led to a prophecy.
August 29th, 1897, he calls together 208 Jews. And by the way, says, meet in formal dress, because we're dignified people. We're not losers. And he says, after that Congress, and he puts it in his diaries, but he won't put it in public. He says, nobody's going to believe me, but in Basel we founded the Jewish state. And 50 years from now, people are going to see that I'm right. And indeed, 50 years later, the United Nations on November 29th, 1947, voted to recognize that Zionist idea, that the Jews are a people, they have ties to a particular homeland, and the right to establish a state on that homeland. And a year later, so 51 years later, May 1948, Israel was established. And so he really was a prophet.
Activists began to push for a Jewish homeland, and thousands began moving to what the Bible called the Promised Land. The Jews had been scattered from here some 1,300 years before, and though many believed their ancient homeland to be lost forever, Herzl had faith.
Here's this guy leading this broken, scattered people, but he believes in the power of an idea. He believes that ideas are the force that can move history. Ideas are a force that can reunite people.
Although Herzl died in 1904, his influence helped lead to the 1917 Balfour Declaration, which endorsed the idea of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Herzl's dream was well on its way to fruition. He'd always believed if you push hard enough, a dream, an idea, could become a reality. He wrote that this particular dream of a Jewish return to Zion must be made real.
It is as old as our people, which has never, even in times of direst misery, ceased to cherish it. The Jewish state is something the world needs, and consequently, it will come into being. And it has.
Still ahead, the stones cry out, a 1,500-year-old evidence of the Jewish presence in ancient Israel. Israeli archaeologists are inviting Israelis to see a unique artifact found outside Jerusalem as part of their Independence Day celebrations. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us this report.
This 1,500-year-old ornate limestone piece once sat on top of an ancient column. The carved image on it surprised archaeologists.
At first, when we found it, we didn't even realize it was a menorah because it was sitting upside down. Only afterward, when we started to examine it and flip the image, we realized it was an 8-branched menorah.
Excavation director Dr. Uzi Ad says they discovered the artifact on the floor of a Byzantine-era building near a church.
Usually at the top of a capital, there is a flower. Here, suddenly, there's a menorah, and that is unique. The menorahs of that period were not standardized. So the symbol, the shape of the menorah, sometimes appears with 7 branches and sometimes with 8 branches.
The piece was unearthed 5 years ago during excavations for building a new entrance to Jerusalem.
We have no other capitals of this quality at the site. It raised my questions in general about how it came to be here. What is a menorah doing at a non-Jewish Byzantine Christian site? You would expect several capitals to be similar. Here, it's a one-of-a-kind capital.
Experts say menorahs, modeled after the temple candelabra, typically appear at synagogues. Since there's no evidence of a synagogue at this site, they believe this capital may have been moved for another use.
Following the research, we now know that it was indeed produced in the region. Based on the type of limestone it was made from, it is probably local. There's significance here because this symbol, which even appears today on our shirts and in other places, carries a sense of national pride when you find a menorah.
Rabbi Amichai Eliyahu, Israeli Minister of Heritage, says finding the capital is tangible evidence of the profound and undeniable connection between the Jewish people, Jerusalem, and the land of Israel throughout thousands of years, and serves as a bridge between our glorious past and the renewal of our independence in the State of Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, expresses yearning and hope for the Jewish people to be a free nation in their homeland. We leave you with a beautiful rendition by Karen Hadar.
Nefesh
Well, that's such an inspiring rendition. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. And thanks for your prayers, and please keep them up for protection for Israel, for the peace of Jerusalem, and for all the hostages to be returned soon. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here in the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.